What secret rituals did Buzz Aldrin perform on the moon, completely alone and in radio silence, before the world ever heard Neil Armstrong's famous first words? And why did NASA try to make sure almost no one would ever find out about it? You see, the very first food and drink consumed on another world weren't part of some official NASA experiment. They were Christian communion elements, quietly shared between one astronaut and his God, as humanity looks toward Mars. This forgotten story predicts a future conflict, a cultural battle over what kinds of personal faith and rituals are allowed in the final frontier. Months before Apollo 11 launched, Buzz Aldrin, the second man set to walk on the moon, was also a devout Presbyterian elder. He felt a deep need to mark this incredible moment with something more than just science and engineering. He wanted to acknowledge something greater, so he went to his pastor, and together they came up with a plan: Holy Communion on the moon. His pastor prepared a tiny small piece of bread, a vial of wine, and a miniature silver chalice, all small enough to fly as part of Aldrin's personal allowance. The plan was synchronized across 250,000 miles on Sunday, July 20th, 1969. His church back in Texas held a special communion service. At the same time, Aldrin, sitting in the Lunar Module on the Sea of Tranquility, prepared to do the same. His congregation in Texas even left their service symbolically open, refusing to sing the final blessing until Aldrin had completed his part on the moon and returned home. Now, Aldrin originally wanted to broadcast this ceremony, sharing a Bible passage with the entire world. But NASA was nervous. Just months earlier, the Apollo 8 crew had read from the book of Genesis while orbiting the moon on Christmas Eve. This prompted a lawsuit from an atheist activist who argued that government employees conducting religious broadcasts from space violated the separation of church and state. Although the lawsuit didn't go far, NASA was still feeling the heat and wanted to avoid any more controversy. So, the mission planners asked Aldrin to keep his ceremony private. No on-air scripture, and no explicit mention of communion. That's why, right after the Eagle had landed and the initial checks were done, Aldrin did something unusual. He asked for a moment of radio silence. During that quiet, he poured the communion wine into the tiny chalice, watching it settle slowly in the moon's 1/6 gravity. He set the bread and wine on a small table next to the guidance computer. He then quietly read a verse from the Gospel of John. "I am the vine, you are the branches." This verse spoke to him about connection and dependence, a reminder that human achievement is nothing without a deeper source. Inside that cramped module, with his helmet off, he consumed the bread and wine. He became the first person to perform a religious ritual on another world. He later wrote about his quiet wonder, realizing that the first liquid ever poured and the first food ever eaten on the moon were the elements of communion. NASA didn't publicize it. There were no press releases, no photos, and no mention in the official audio transcripts. For the agency, it was simple: keep personal faith off the public airwaves. For Aldrin, it was a compromise. He felt a duty to his beliefs, but he also understood that Apollo 11 belonged to all of humanity, not just one faith. It wasn't until about a year later that Aldrin shared his story, first in a magazine article and later in books. By then, the world knew one small step for man, but few knew about the quiet act of devotion that came just before it. Aldrin himself later reflected that if he could do it again, he might choose a more inclusive way to mark the occasion. Since they went to the moon in the name of all mankind, back on Earth, his church became known as the Church of the Astronauts, and the little chalice he used on the moon is now a treasured artifact. Each year, they hold a special lunar communion to remember this unique moment in history. The story continues to spark debate. What does it mean to carry our earthly rituals into space? This leads us to a bold prediction. Aldrin's quiet act raised questions that future missions to the moon and Mars can't ignore. As we send diverse multinational crews on long journeys, personal faith will become part of daily life in space. Debates over prayer rooms on space stations or religious holidays on Mars will become just as intense as they are on Earth. So let's go back to that unforgettable image. Before the world watched the first footprint, Buzz Aldrin sat in the Lunar Module, alone, holding a tiny chalice and a piece of bread. Outside, a silent, ancient landscape. Inside, a man whispered words of scripture. That moment, nearly lost to history, asks a profound question that echoes even louder today. When we finally leave Earth for good, what part of our soul will we bring with us? Thanks for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more hidden histories.